She was born Anne Frances Robbins on July 6, 1921, in New York.
Her birth father essentially abandoned her and her mother.
Nancy Reagan's mother was an actress, and she was on the road and away from Nancy. So I think she always felt kind of abandoned as a young child.
In 1929, Nancy was 7 years old when her mother married a prominent neurosurgeon named Loyal Davis. The move to his home in Chicago provided Nancy with a strong parental figure.
He was always there for her, which her biological father wasn't. He was quite inspirational for her.
After graduating from Smith College in 1943, Nancy moved to Hollywood to pursue work as an actress. It was there that she met an actor and recent divorcee named Ronald Reagan.
It ended up being an incredible love affair that people still, when they reflect on it and speak of it, feel it was one of the greatest relationships they've ever witnessed.
They married in a small ceremony on March 4, 1952. Nancy quickly settled into the role of homemaker, while her husband moved toward a career in politics.
Well, it wasn't really too long into their marriage that she had her first child, her daughter. As a result of that, there really wasn't all that much time for Ronald and Nancy Reagan to just be, newlyweds.
He had 2 children from the first marriage, and Nancy was a sometime mother to those 2.
In 1967, Ronald Reagan was elected governor of California. Life under the political limelight was not easy for Nancy.
The political coverage she received as a governor's wife was hypercritical.
The press was very hard on Nancy Reagan. They really played into the caricature and stereotypes of her as wealthy, privileged, distant.
Nancy Reagan responded to the criticisms by becoming a much more visible force in her husband's presidential campaigns.
Every strategist knew what a powerful ally Nancy Reagan could be, and if they got on the wrong side of her, that they'd be gone.
In 1980, Ronald Reagan defeated Jimmy Carter to become the 40th president of the United States.
Nancy Reagan came in and undertook some refurbishing and redesign projects within the White House, and it led to some negative press.
But even her harshest critics could not deny Nancy's devotion to her husband.
Nancy Reagan was there as the president's wife, first and foremost.
She was highly conscientious about his nutrition, about his rest and sleep, about making sure he wasn't overworked.
In 1982, Nancy Reagan launched a national drug awareness campaign called Just Say No.
Nancy Reagan herself didn't just give it lip service. She traveled about 250,000 miles to try to promote the Just Say No campaign.
Eventually, it became a policy issue that she was very much involved in.
After 8 years in the White House, Ronald and Nancy Reagan returned to California.
They were the most devoted couple that most people had ever seen.
They traveled around the world. They both wrote their memoirs. But once his Alzheimer's set in, Mrs. Reagan became his caretaker.
Ronald Reagan passed away on June 5, 2004. That same year, Nancy Reagan took an aggressive stance in support of stem cell research.
Nancy Reagan became more involved, asking then President George W. Bush to take a real look at embryonic stem cell funding and research.
Nancy Reagan has a fascinating legacy in that it goes from somebody seen as more style than substance and ended as having perhaps more substance than style.